In this video, I removed spoke rims, replaced some axle studs, and rebuild the rear brake cylinders on a Dodge L700 grain truck. I started by removing the nuts, and I didn't remove them all the way. I left them on there part of the way because they can be under tension, so I'll get to that next. But yeah, I just want to loosen them up and leave them on about a nut's worth of threads. You don't want them flying off and hitting you. That wouldn't be any fun. The next step is just to hit them with a hammer, and not the nut itself, but the little keeper lock things. You can see they're loosened up right there, but I like to spin it because they can get wedged. Then once that's done, I just take them off the rest of the way, and if they do try to pop off and fly at you, that nut will hold them on there. I had sprayed everything with penetrating oil beforehand and wire brushed all the heavy dirt and stuff off, but hitting it, some stuff came out, so I went ahead and blew off all the dirt I could. Don't let my strength fool you. Those things are like 100 pounds each, so just came right off. And then inside there's a spacer that looks more like something you'd use for like baking a cake or something, but that would make a great upside down pineapple cake mold frame, whatever you call those. The inner tires can get stuck on there. See, I'm spinning and fighting it, but I'm not making much progress here. But it is moving. That's a good sign. So at this point, I kind of gave up because it gets wedged in there, and came with a 2-pound hammer and just hit it and rotate it, hit it and rotate it. Kind of tried to save my back a little bit and persuade it. Had to coach it off there. Once it got to a certain point, I was able just to pull it off. This is a good workout right here. Now you don't want to let that rim drag on those nuts because you could mess up the threads of those, well, not nuts, those bolt threads there. They're studs actually. So to get the brake drum off, you got to take off the axle. And this is a Eaton 2-speed rear end. I think it's a 2.5 ton, and it's held in with 8 bolts. So once I get the bolts off, sometimes you can tap it, but because I siliconed, the previous owner, or whoever worked on this before, siliconed it on, the tapping wasn't making any progress. So what I have here is I have a vice grips on a slide hammer, and there's a little cone alignment, I don't know, shim, washer thing. So what I did is I used the slide hammer on the ones I could get and pulled them off. And I'm putting all of my nuts into a magnetic tray to keep everything organized and off the dirt. Once I got the ones I could, I used a small ball peen hammer to hold against it and a bigger hammer to hit it, and I let that smaller hammer slide back so it actually did loosen up, and then I was able to pull off of the rest of those little centers or keep, whatever they're called, the hold that axle. And then once that, the axle just slides right out. There's no other keepers on it. That's a beefy axle right there. You're not going to break that one. So I'm going through and looking because it had some grease in it to see if the lock retaining washer had a tab bent out, and this one did not. And it was fairly loose, and I think partly because maybe it loosened up and it didn't have that tab bent out. And if these things are the other side I did, it was on there. I had to use a cheater on that breaker bar to actually get this off. And I think that's 3 1/4. It's a 6-point socket. I had the 12-point socket. It does not work. So make sure you get the right one there. Okay, so the next thing is that little retainer thing comes out. And it has a clip on the inside that goes in that groove on the spindle. And then the outside tabs bend over. I'm using some brake cleaner to try to clean this up. I don't know what that grease was inside because this is lubed from the differential itself, so like the 80-90 weight oil in there should be coming out to the end. And then you can see it just came off with my fingers. It was way too loose, I think, until the end. Then I had to use the socket on it. Now I went behind it and there's two adjusters for the brakes. I loosened those up 4 clicks each. And then I was able just to slide that off. And that's another 100-pound thing right there. That's heavy, that brake drum. I used about 3 cans of brake parts cleaner, just the $2 Walmart stuff, non-chlorinated. It still stinks, but in an open area it's not too bad. You can see there's brown spots on there. I think that's actually from things that were the nuts being too loose and the bearings, races kind of not doing their thing. This is a tool actually it's not for big trucks like this, but it's for cars, like passenger cars and trucks. And it worked when I used the screwdriver with it. Makes it a lot nicer than trying to pry it off with a screwdriver or try to get vice grips on it. So I was able to loosen it up and then pop it off. Here's me just taking a couple of the bolts off of the wheel cylinders. You can see that it's wet because I took off that other brake line when I did the other side. And I sprayed that with some penetrating oil, and I ended up cleaning up a lot more than that. But you can see, even though these side wasn't leaking, it had inside, the cups were leaking, and it's all kinds of nasty stuff in there. You can't really see, but these are American-made ones, made in the U.S., and they have the size on the inside of the cups, which is handy. Those are 1 5/8". The new ones I get don't have that, and I think they're made overseas. Actually, I know they're made overseas. Don't remember where. So I took some Power Purple, and that's inside of a stainless tray I got at an auction. I think they're used for catering, but I just hit everything with that and let it soak, trying to get some of the grease off of it. So after, I think it was about 15-20 minutes, I went through and took the water hose to it, and it's really nice. You can pull out that inner tray, and you can see a dead spot in my lawn there from washing stuff off. After it's all washed off, I hit it with air, and this was just to get the major dirt and grease off everything. So the stuff that was like bearings and the stuff that was all greasy, I put inside my parts washer, and then the inside, I think they're aluminum. Those things right there from inside the wheel cylinders, I put those in also. I ended up picking up every piece and brushing it and rotating it and holding it. So those are the links, I believe they're called, the wheel cylinder links. I did those and the wheel cylinders themselves, and this is with the fine glass in my cabinet and low air pressure. And I just hit everything lightly just to kind of knock off all the buildup on it. And there they are, cleaned up. So those links I put in a bag, and then I used some WD-40 just to kind of get them, I wanted to get them oiled up so they didn't rust, corrode as quickly. The inside of the cylinders I didn't hit with the blast cabinet, so I took an old screwdriver and scraped off any of the thick stuff, but I didn't want to scratch it, so just be careful, and it helps with the honing here. I don't like the dry hone, so I used some WD-40. It's probably not the best honing oil, but it worked. And I did the top and the bottom. They're the same wheel cylinders, so it didn't matter. You mix them up. So I'd hit them, and then I'd rotate them, and then I'd hit them again, and then I would clean them and check them, and I think I did that a couple times for each. You gotta rotate them because it's easier to get the bottoms and the tops. This is just cleaning it up again to see how it came out. If there's any big grooves in there, you gotta replace them if you can't get them out. So this is the rebuild kits. They're fairly inexpensive. like $4 each or something. Comes with the cups. I think those are called boots. So this one is going to go all the way to the bottom. The cup part needs to face the inside. Then put the spring in, and then the other cup goes that way. Next, the aluminum things go in. I don't know what those are called. Don't remember. Now the links inside the boots there, they're really hard to get on. So I pushed them on to the depth I needed. So I was struggling with that one there a little bit, but it finally goes. And then I just put them on just to hold everything together for now. I'll orientate it when I get out to the truck again. And do the same for both of them. Because I put these in the blast cabinet, I think it's like just 10 weight 30 motor oil is what I put on here. I just wanted to rub them down so that they didn't, to help protect it. I didn't want them to corrode or rust too quickly. I don't know how much protection it's going to give them, but being that I cleaned up everything, I wanted them to look a little bit nicer and for a little bit longer. And I rubbed the oil in real good. So the wheel bearings are lubed from the differential itself, and it takes oil and puts it down in the housing. I didn't want, even though these weren't new and they were used bearings, they look good, but I didn't want them to be ran dry. So I just took a tiny bit of bearing grease and just rubbed it on the actual bearings themselves. This is not the way you pack bearings, but these aren't supposed to be packed because they're supposed to be lubed from the differential. And then I use some assembly lube, which is that real sticky stuff you put on cams when you're putting engines together. And I tried to get that on the bearings, hoping that it would stay on there. And the thought is I just don't want this to be dry when I'm starting to go down the road. I don't know how much of a difference it makes or not, but I'm sure any little bit helps. So now I got to do the orientation. One goes up and down, and then one goes side to side. So I held it up, and then I used a screwdriver to pop those boots back off. Then I line them up and put them back on. Then I did the other side also. There's a little cover, and there's only 2 small bolts that hold those on. So I got that one bolted up, and I went to the next one. Those bolts could be tricky. I think it's mainly because the brake pads aren't centered right there. But once I get them finger tight, I took the ratchet and hand torqued them, just kind of guessing the torquing of them. It's the same tool. It has a little slot in it, and then you could slide that onto your spring, and then that little slot goes there to keep it from sliding off the end. And you can see how the pad moved up, but it might take a couple tries. The pad moved up, so it's probably going to go this time, if I remember right. And this is a lot easier than trying with a screwdriver or vice grips, but it can be done with a screwdriver. So there you go. And proceed to do the other ones, and this is the last one here. The smaller ones went a lot easier. The last one also went first try there. So I cleaned up the inside of this with a lot of brake cleaner, so I also tried to get some of that assembly lube to get on the bearings. Not sure how much I actually got on this bearing because it's in there and it's with a seal. This is the second try. I had to hit the pads to get them to line up a little bit better the first try, and that thing is heavy. Some people, they won't take the tires off. They have a cart that you can take both duals and that off at the same time, but that's like 300 something pounds. And I put that in. So I like to tighten it so it won't spin, and then back it off, and then kind of see where I'm at with that. You see I got, I don't know, maybe a quarter, a little bit over a quarter, maybe a half spin there. Just kind of doing it by feel. Next goes in that lock ring washer. One tab was already bent in, so that lined up good. And then went on the outer nut, and I put this one a lot tighter than it was. You can see I'm tightening it up. Also there I'm bending a tab out so it doesn't come undone. So I missed some of that video, but I did put a little bit of silicone and use my finger to spread it real thin because I'm just trying to keep the water out. And then I put these back on. I torqued these, I think I went to 80 foot-pounds. I don't know what the actual torque was. These things are a lot easier going back on. I didn't rotate them, I just put it back on the same way. Just push it back as far as I could. Put my upside down pineapple cake spacer in there. And the outer dual. Now for putting these back on, I put those little wedge, I think they are called wedges, back on, and then nuts. And then I put my impact on the low setting and in a star type pattern so it walked on evenly. I tightened them all up. So I'm getting the nuts on there. See, I just kind of work it in a star so it works the rims on. And then I went to medium and did it, and this is where I'm on full. And you could see the gap between the, I don't know if we'd call that the spoke or the inner rim, and then the wedge there. And I just kept going until there was no gap on any of them. So they're on there pretty tough. So this is from the other side. If you have to change these out, what you could do is you put two nuts on it, you jam one against the other, and then the bottom nut you should be able to screw it and it goes tight against the top so it will come out. And that one came out, but they don't always come out, so if they don't, you just put one on and you just tack it on. And this one I think I put a bunch of booger welds on. I didn't want it to come off, so that was probably enough right there, but I kept going. And then just took the wrench and undid it. The heat probably even helped a little bit. These things back out. You can get these at Napa. I went through and cleaned the inside of it really well. That's where it's boogered up. So when you're putting the axle in, you need to spin the whole drum and itself to line it up, and so you're not hitting. I think what somebody did is they actually banged that axle in and messed up the threads, so they put double nuts on it. And then I'm blowing out those holes to make sure they're dry. I did that like 3 or 4 times. Well, there's a second or a third. I don't remember which one this was. And I did that so many times and dried them out because I wanted that Loctite to stick real good. I wanted to harden in those holes. So I just hand tightened it until it seemed like it bottomed out. And then once the Loctite cured, I was able to take those nuts off. So here I'm filling up the master cylinder, and the way this truck works is it has a master cylinder up front with the pedal hooks too, and then it has a single master cylinder, and the line goes into a vacuum booster, and then from the vacuum booster it comes to the front and to the back. So if you lose one wheel cylinder, you could pump your brakes, but you're going to lose all your brakes. And the other side was leaking, got to be so bad that you go a couple miles and you're hitting your brakes during that time, then you wouldn't have any more brakes. So that's why I had to get these fixed. And this is a power brake bleeder. This is the only way I'm able to bleed these big trucks. I've tried by somebody pumping it. You can do it all day and you still can't get them. And what it does is it has a air bladder in the bottom. Well, there's like a membrane in between. In the bottom you put air and the top has brake fluid. So you're pressurizing the system with brake fluid. And it has an adapter, and that's just basically an air fitting. But in that line is pressurized brake fluid. And I think I'm running 20 or 30 psi. It doesn't take much. So I open it up and closing it up expecting to get some fluid and didn't get much. And then I go to the other side, so I start from the furthest away and then do all of them. There's also one at the top I had to get, and I hit them all, I think 2 or 3 times because they were spitting air. Since I've taken those back brake lines off, I had to do that. Well, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you learned something from it, and thanks for watching. Bye.